So when we go to load a semi-automatic as a right-handed shooter, we're gonna again follow the safe steps. So S, set up the mag, A, ammo insert, F, fully rack, and E, ensure ready. So we're going to talk about each one of those steps here. So as a right-handed shooter, the first thing I want to do is I want to set up my magazine. My magazine, of course, is going to be my source of ammunition for this semi-automatic. So to set up the magazine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, as a right-handed shooter, I'll use my right thumb to access this magazine release. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that magazine, or excuse me, turn the firearm just slightly in my hand here so that I can get to that magazine release button. You'll notice in normal shooting position as a right-handed shooter, I can't usually access that button. That's intentional. That's so you don't bump it while you're shooting. So to really get to it, you kind of need to cant the firearm in your hand usually. So I'm going to cant it slightly, press that magazine release button, and out pops the magazine. Now I'm ready to set up my magazine. So to set up my magazine as a right-handed shooter, you'll notice I want to take that magazine, I want to put it in my left hand, and I'm going to put it right about the base of the thumb. So what I want my thumb to do is be able to make this motion across the top. So I want it right at the base of my thumb so that my thumb can make this motion. And what my thumb is going to do is most of the loading. I'm going to use my right hand, I'm going to take my trigger finger and my thumb, and I'm going to pinch right at the tip of the bullet. And when I do this, you'll notice I don't want to be way down here. A lot of people tend to do this, but then it gets in the way of your thumb when you're trying to load. I want to pinch right at the tip with my trigger finger and my thumb. And now I'm going to lay them right in front of these two lips that are on my magazine. I want to lay that bullet right in front of those two lips. I'm going to use my thumb to press down and pull back. And as you can see, I now have those two lips holding that bullet into place because I pressed the bullet down underneath of them and pulled it back. So I'm just going to continue to do that. As many as I want to use, I'll just pinch right at the very top with my trigger finger and thumb, put it in front of those two lips, and then I will push down, pull back. And a tip that you can use is to either set this magazine on a firm surface like a table, or as I just did here, put it up against your stomach to give you something to brace it to help make it go in easier. Now that I've set up my magazine, it's time to do my ammo insert. So what I want to do here is I want to take my magazine, I'm going to put it into my magazine well. So I want to get the magazine, make sure the bullet is facing in the direction I want it to travel. So front of the bullet should be facing towards the muzzle of the firearm. And I'm going to insert it into that magazine well until I hear a click. And if I'm not sure if I got it in or not, or actually as just a good practice, I want to do a tap tug. So I tap it to make sure it's in place and then give it a little tug to make sure that it's firmly secured in the firearm. So tap, tug, just to make sure it's in place. Now that I've got my ammo inserted, now I want to fully rack the slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left hand, I'm going to take the meat of my left hand, I'm going to put it on the left side of the slide. I'm going to wrap my fingers over the top of it onto the other side. And you'll notice if I do it correctly, I've got a little hole here where I can point my finger into that hole. So I've got a good grip on this firearm now, as you can see. Now I'm going to use my right hand to push as my left hand pulls so that I get the slide all the way to the rear. So I want it all the way to the rear like that. And then I'm going to let go. So I want to let go of that slide to make sure that this little spring up here does its job and firmly seats around into the chamber. So again, I want to let go. That is how I'm going to fully rack my slide. What I don't want to do is what we call riding the slide, where I grab onto the slide and try to ease it forward. So a round's going to spit out here as I do this, but what I don't want to do is ease it forward like this. A lot of people do that because they don't want to beat up their gun, but every time you press the trigger, That's what's happening. That slide is moving all the way to the rear and slamming forward. So the gun is used to this. That's how it does its job appropriately. So when fully racking the slide, pull it all the way to the rear and let go. So the way we like to teach it is to pat yourself on the shoulder. Hey, good job. And you notice when I do that, I don't have a tendency to hold on to the slide as it goes forward. I pull it back, pat myself on the shoulder. Pat myself on the shoulder. What a great job I'm doing. And this way, I'm letting this spring do its work. Now, we talked about how to get around into the chamber with the slide closed. But what if the slide is open? So I've taken my magazine, I've inserted it in there, tap, tug, everything's in place. How do I get around into the chamber now? Well, a lot of people make a crucial mistake right here. They like to use the slide stop to handle it. And they've seen it on movies and they think it looks cool and they're like, there we go, chambered me around. Looks cool, right? But there's a couple problems with that you need to be aware of. The first problem is, remember we talked about how important it is to get that slide all the way to the rear so that you can let this spring do its job. Well, guess what? As I take this out, is my slide all the way to the rear right now? It's not, because look, I can still pull it back just a little bit. So I didn't have my slide all the way to the rear. So that's the first problem. The second problem is this. When I have this open, if you're using this little slide stop to close the slide, what happens if you're under stress? What are some of the physiological responses we have? Well, first off, fine motor skills go out the door. It turns into gross motor skills. Where I might have used my thumb to do this before, now my whole hand wants to do it. And that's not gonna work. Plus the other thing is we tend to sweat. So imagine if I've got gross motor skills in action and I'm sweating profusely and I'm trying to hit this little button. It's not gonna work out so good for me, is it? So here's the simple solution. If your slide is locked open and you insert a magazine, tap, tug, and you need to get around in the chamber, do it just like you did it with the slide closed. Wrap around with the meat of your hand, fingers on the other side, pull all the way to the rear and let go. Great job. Finally, I want to ensure that I have a round ready to go in my firearm. So ensure that it's ready. And the way I want to do this is doing what we call a press check. And this press check is simply going to make sure that I have a round in the chamber. The way I do it is I keep my finger, my trigger finger, firmly on the frame of the firearm, not down by the trigger. I keep it firmly on the frame. And what I'm going to do with this now is I want to just pull this slide back just slightly, but not far enough to spit out the round that's in there, just a little tiny bit. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use my left index finger, and you notice I kind of curl my left index finger onto those rear sights, and I put my thumb kind of on the back strap there, and I'm just going to pull back just a hair just so that I can see, oh, there is a round in there. And I can actually even put my finger in and feel that the round is in there. That way I have ensured that I am ready to shoot. Now, I want to make sure that slide goes back fully in battery, we call it, fully forward. So I might want to give it just a little push just to make sure it went all the way back and that the round is firmly seated.